The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Affordable ERP for Mining. My name is Rihanna Thompson, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. Today, we will be exploring how your organization can implement our SAP Business ByDesign mining solution for a low and affordable price. For today's presentation, we are joined by two representatives of Illumity, Pat Sandel, Account Executive, Mining, and Jacob Maga, Finance Consulting, SAP Business ByDesign. Before handing it over to Pat to kick off today's presentation, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping items from the start. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters. So if you have any questions during the broadcast, feel free to type them out into the chat. However, in the interest of time, we will try to answer all questions during our Q&A session at the end. Hopefully, we'll have time to get to everyone. With that being said, Pat, I hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Rihanna. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We are here today to showcase the affordable ERP for mining solution. So whether you are exploration mine, in construction, or in production, we have a mining solution for you. In terms of an agenda, I'm going to provide you a high-level overview of Illumity and our Business ByDesign solution, and then I'll turn it over to Jacob, who's going to take you through the demonstration and finish off with production statistics, and then Q&A time permitting. A little bit about Illumity. Illumity is a boutique systems integration and management consulting company. We help our customers transform their business through innovative technology. We go to market across 4 key industries, mining being the largest. We had a very exciting year in 2021. We joined forces with another large Canadian managed services company, Syntax. And you can see here, this has turned us really into a global powerhouse. We finished off 2021 with $450 million in revenue, over 500 combined customers, and really an opportunity to address many of the requirements that our customers have, from managed services, application services, through what Illumity does best, which is implementing SAP. We focus on junior mining companies all around the world. Most of our customers are headquartered either in Canada or United States. We've implemented at companies such as Marathon Gold, Bluestone Resources, Sabina Gold, all the way up to some of the largest companies, mining companies in the world, such as Barrick Gold, Centerra Gold, and Glencore. Most people don't know that just how broad SAP is in terms of implementations around the world. And over 75% of SAP's implementations are in companies of $1 billion or less in revenue. And more importantly than that, more than close to 70% of SAP customers are what we call in the mid-sized space. So SAP has really grown from being a Fortune 100, 500 company to a solution that fits most of our customers, and especially in the junior mining space. In terms of SAP for mining, SAP is well known to the mining community. Over 70% of the world's gold today is produced by SAP customers, and close to 80% of the copper producers are SAP customers. And we like to think in North America, 100% of the most successful mining companies run SAP solutions. Most of the leading mining companies around the world run SAP, from the largest of companies like Vale, Glencore, Rio Tinto. SAP has been providing solutions in the mining industry for over 40 years. There's an industry advisory council for mining made up of SAP customers that continue to influence the future direction of the solutions in the mining industry. And all lines of business are supported on a single integrated ERP platform, which we'll be showcasing today. In terms of our experience, we've been working in mining for over 15 years. We've got a great deal of breadth of experience within the mining industry. We've got over 40 global mining customers across 80 mine sites globally. We hold an annual mining user group meeting where topics are presented, and we look at new innovative technologies to include in our solution. We have an SAP certified mining template that allows us to be able to implement very quickly, reduce the risk and cost for our customers. And we have a dedicated mining implementation team and a direct line of communications to SAP's industry business unit. In terms of our affordable ERP for mining solution, this is what's included. So a full financial and management accounting solution, including fixed assets, full procurement solution, including spare parts and non-stock purchases, approval for expenditures, as well as being integrated with a request for quotation process. For mining companies that are just starting into the construction phase, we've got a full project management system that will allow them to be able to manage all of their costs and the assets under construction, all the way through to project completion. It is a global solution. We have localization support for countries all around the world, multi-company, multi-currency, and local expert implementation support. And as well, we've got full analytics as part of the solution to measure corporate performance, as well as production statistics, which you'll be seeing in the demonstration. We're very proud of the customers that we've been able to work with in the mining industry, and you'll see some of the logos here. And as we go through having an opportunity to speak with you after the webinar, we'd certainly be happy to have you speak to some of our customers. Our solution sits on top of SAP's fastest growing ERP system called Business ByDesign, which is really a suite-in-a-box solution. So it includes everything from financial management to human resources, project management, supplier relationship management, supply chain management, and customer relationship management. It sits on SAP's HANA Cloud platform and allows for full mobility, included analytics within the solution, e-learning, and workflow. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jacob, and he is going to take you through the demonstration. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. I'll just wait for my screen. Okay, Rihanna, just ensuring that everyone can see my screen.
You are good to go.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so this is Business ByDesign. This is actually the launchpad for which our users will enter into after bringing in their credentials. This is a typical launchpad for someone who has a super-admin access. Of course, not typical of our users, but definitely easy for me to showcase the system so I don't have to go in and out of different credentials. As you can see, I'm using Chrome, which is a typical browser that most of our users will use. However, it does support off of Microsoft Edge. If you're working through Mac, you can use Safari. But any industry-leading browser will work just fine for ByDesign. When looking into the Launchpad, this is, again, where everyone will start their day within ByDesign. Again, for this particular user, it's a very financial-heavy user. And so therefore, you'll see a lot of tabs that are related to financial work centers and so on. By drilling down further into the Launchpad, you'll notice that there are a couple of different areas that are of key concern for most of our users. There's a key performance indicators that will show you real-time information, financial information or data information that is driven through the system. You can revise how often this is updated and of course refresh the information to ensure you're viewing real-time information. On top of this, we are able to integrate several external services. So in this case, we brought in Microsoft Planner, MS Teams, SAP Analytics Cloud, and so on. So it's just a handy way for our users to, of course, interact with other software integration and allowing for a fluid workflow between the day. This, again, as Pat suggested, is also where our mining IP solution is housed. So within this entire tenant, we will see a lot of mining-specific applications. And again, this is very indicative of our clients, especially in the mining area, to use. This allows us to implement SAP within your teams very quickly and scale, in a sense of a rapid sense, and as well ensuring that the system adheres to all your corporate governance. Another area to show, if this area is not showing any of the work centers that you're interested in, by clicking on the left navigation pane, will show the users work centers for everything that they're entitled to see. SAP does have built-in analytics and integration for surveying OXLI segregation of duties compliance. So when designing a business workflow for your organization, SAP will provide indications of which work centers may cause segregation of duty conflicts, and making it very easier for your organization to comply with these types of items. Another handy part of it ByDesign is up at the top right. You'll see there's a help center. Within this help center, there are a number of different documents that you can see. So when trying to produce a transaction or when trying to understand the business workflow within ByDesign, you can reference this area to help you through that process. There are a number of different forms. So in this case, and actually if I put in a string such as asset construction, once you input the string, SAP will provide you with the available or the most significant match to your string. In this case, we have not only Business ByDesign documentation, technical documentation that's been published through SAP, but we also have a community area. So ByDesign being a large SaaS offering, there is a number of users within ByDesign that can participate in a community forum. So any of these publications may be of value to you, and you are able, as a SAP ByDesign user, are able to participate in this forum as well. But focusing on the technical documentation that SAP provides, this is actually an example of what type of documentation that you'd be looking at. So hosting assets under construction. In this case, we have a business overview. So this just gives you an understanding of what the business transactions that this particular process would entail. The configuration prerequisites that will be required for this process to work, as well as a process flow. So in this case, we'll show you, exactly where in the system you would need to interact with the system to process an asset under construction transaction. And we'll even show you all the accounting transactions as well. So a great deal of detail is shown within the within SAP's technical documentation, and certainly a very helpful tool to use when working through SAP. So moving up, I also want to show you, and the Pat kind of reached on or touched on before, was the KPIs. So there is a plethora of KPIs that are available to any SAP Business ByDesign user. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to KPIs, but showing you just the wide variety of KPIs that you may use. I included a couple of KPIs that we find indicative for most of our implementations, and again, most of them on my side, being a finance consultant, are very finance heavy, but certainly is not well, I should say there's certainly enough KPIs within the SCM side or any other side of ByDesign. One KPI that I actually want to draw attention to is the Maverick spend. This is a very critical and popular KPI that most of our finance teams use. And it's actually, as shown in the blockbuster hit Top Gun, Maverick being the pilot that goes against most rules. This is a report that shows any supplier invoices that were cut without reference to PO. So certainly something that the finance team would like to ensure that the compliance is held, and that minimal amount of spend is driven through this type of transaction. And so obviously a KPI that's typically used by a lot of our customers. Coming into another one that's obviously probably top of mind for most finance people is a supplier payables aging report. So by clicking into this report, we can see further information on this KPI. Now, within a KPI, you can actually design several different reporting compliance reports. So in this case, we have a target report, which allows us to generate notification based on different levels for which this KPI reaches. So in this case, we have a $35,000 corporate governance target, and on top of that, if the AP aging gets to a value of $100,000 or more, a certain notification is sent to a certain number of users. And then if it's a $200,000 balance or more, then we actually can design a separate type of notification to ensure that all applicable users are aware of these values. On top of that, as you can see in the KPI screen, there is a visual plus a data extract of all of your buckets within the AP aging report. But in this, assuming that you want to see more information on your AP aging balances, then you can simply just click on Analyze Data. By clicking on Analyze Data, you will be brought to SAP ByDesign's reporting engine. This reporting engine is a comprehensive tool that can be used in not only finance work centers, but in every work center that is available within ByDesign. It is very intuitive to use, but very powerful. The way I like to suggest the reporting engine in ByDesign is it very much acts like Excel pivot tables. So if you're proficient in Excel, then you'll have no problem understanding the functionality within ByDesign. Again, going back to the AP aging report, we can see the visual as shown in the KPI. We can also see the raw data here. But if we want to explore deeper into the data, we can simply just focus on just the data itself. So in this case, we have focused on all of our different buckets. But in the case that we want to see, the supplier that makes up the balance of these buckets and perhaps the documents that also make up the balance, you can simply go to View and click on Row Fields. This will show you all the available data points or data sources that interact with this particular data source. And in this case, like I said, I want to see the supplier, which in this case is a business partner within ByDesign. And I also want to see the supplier invoice ID, for example. So clicking on these data objects will bring the information to the report itself. But as you can see, the report isn't as user-friendly or is not as meaningful as you likely want it to show. And as suggested before, this reporting engine, again, looks a lot like and functions a lot like Excel pivot tables. And I'll give you an example of that. So bringing the key figures or the buckets for your AP aging reports that are currently shown as a column, or sorry, as a row, we can simply drag it over to the column field. And now we can see a report that's so much more organized for the user to see. And so in this case, we can see the business partner plus the supplier invoice ID and all the buckets shown in their respective columns. So a lot more efficient, easier to use, and of course, simple for the user to adjust on the fly. These types of reports can actually be saved for your profile. So not everyone in the organization can see your custom formatted report. If you wish to broadcast this to the entire organization, that is also possible as well. And you can also download these reports to your system, or you can email them, send them as a link if the user has access to ByDesign as well. Coming down into this report, in the case that most situations, most users like to drill in further in from the AP report to get further information on either transactions, or in this case, I'll look more into the actual supplier itself. So by selecting this handy drop-down menu, we can actually drive right into the supplier partner. I'll back up for 1 second and show you how this is actually possible for any data object within ByDesign. So for example, this is a supplier invoice ID. And this can drive me directly to the view invoice document. In this case, because this data object is actually a supplier, I simply need to click on this drop down and go view business partner overview. The important part about ByDesign and like indicative of most SAP products is that we actually don't view the business partner as a supplier only. We can assign different business partner roles to the particular account. So this becomes handy when, say, Omega, this particular supplier, may act as well as a customer. And this is also maybe not common for all of our customers, for at least our mining clients' supplier listing. But there certainly are some situations where we find, 1 or 2 suppliers could also drive revenue to the organization. In some systems, this would have to be created as a second, or we have to maintain 2 different accounts, one as a customer and one as a supplier, thereby multiplying the amount of effort to maintain these relationships by 2, of course. ByDesign looks at it a little bit differently. So we actually maintain a business partner first, and then we assign the business roles later. So we can create or we can assign, this particular supplier to be a customer and a supplier. This comes in handy when trying to report on netting your AP and AR, for example. It obviously does reduce the amount of administration to maintaining these business partners, but overall, it makes for a much more efficient way of maintaining your business partners. So by drilling into the supplier relationship or business rule of Omegle, we can get to more information that's particularly of a supplier master data. So here we can see some spend history comparisons. Perhaps there's a different address that's being used for their supplier information, payment terms, and so on. So this again is more indicative of the relationship as a supplier, and also only shows the overall information of that supplier. Driving into the financials, we get into more information as to open items or even account balances. The one thing I really want to impress on the group today is that, as Pat suggested, ByDesign is a multi-company system, and what that means is, most of the organizations that we implement on ByDesign have multiple companies that are held underneath it, and those companies may or may not interact with the same suppliers and customers. But in the case that they do, we can assign those company IDs to the same supplier. This not only drives controls as to which companies can do business with which suppliers, but it also allows you to seamlessly understand balances or information such as balances through this overview screen. So very handy to organize multiple organizations or multiple companies that are held under the same holding company. Coming into purchasing, we can see that there's a number of different purchase order IDs that are held underneath this supplier, contracts and RFQs. Maybe there's some price lists that are coming or that are brought into the supplier as well. So again, these are more organized or dependent on purchasing information. So assuming that there's maybe a purchase order that might be on your desk that you'd like to drill further into, maybe there's some information that you've been given and you want to dig into that purchase order, you can simply search on it here. And anywhere that you see in ByDesign a blue hyperlink, that means that there's more information on the back end that you can drill down into. So by drilling into purchase order maybe 506, we can now see an overview of that particular purchase order. And so as most documents within ByDesign, you're first met with a very high level document that shows you, maybe the top 5% of the information that pertains to this particular transaction. And that may do for the research that you're trying to complete. But in most cases, we typically see people drill further into the purchase order or transaction at hand. And that can be done by clicking the View All button, which is very prevalent within ByDesign. By clicking on the View All button, you can see, again, header information for the purchase order, but more importantly, a lot of the granular information that's in items. And so as you can see, this purchase order only has one item. But again, if looking into this one item, we can see basic information such as, the type of information or the type of service or material that's being ordered. But you can see delivery schedules, pricing, taxes, delivery, ship to points, and so on. Moving back up to the top bar, we can see approvals that were required for this particular transaction and when they were approved. But one very important part of the system that we typically see our clients do perform a lot of the research through is the document flow. The document flow, as we like to also suggest, is a cookie crumble or how the transaction will be shown not only for itself, but for any transactions that happen before it and after it. So very powerful tool to understand all the activities that relate to this particular transaction. So as we can see here, we have a purchase order 506 as the one that we drilled down to. And then there was a goods and service receipt that was also created based on the purchase order that was ordering goods or services from. And then a supplier invoice was accepted by the supplier and inputted into the system. By clicking on this anchor, we can actually find more information to this particular transaction. So after the supplier invoice was input in the system, there was a bank transfer that was completed, paying the supplier, and then there was a bank statement that was completed or a bank reconciliation that was clearing this payment. So essentially what we have here is a order to cash scenario in one screen. And if there's one piece of information or transaction that you would like to hone in on, you can certainly do so by clicking again on this blue hyperlink. So if you wanted to do research on the bank statement, you can do it here. The actual bank transfer, you can do it here, the invoice, and so on. But since this is a mining organization, and since most of our mining organizations will take advantage of assets under construction, I want to focus our attention on goods and service confirmation. So again, this was a service that was rendered, and the goods and service confirmation was completed, at which point there's an accounting transaction that transpired. You know this not only by virtue of the actual transaction being posted here as a goods and service confirmation, but also you can see a file folder with a little file that's being dropped into it. When you see this icon, this suggests to you, or this will tell you, that there was an accounting transaction that had transpired. And by clicking on it, you can actually look at the journal entry itself. So as you can see, there are a number of pieces of information, and the first thing I'll show you is the related journal entries. So the first part of this section that I want to impress on the group here is that there's two different sets of books. So very important to note that ByDesign is not only a multi-company, but they're also set of books or multi-ledger service or product. And this comes in handy for a lot of our multinational companies or clients. This not only allows us to report on multiple different accounting standards, but we can also recover or book transactional data in multiple different currencies. So for example, if the functional currency is Mexican, we can actually create a set of books that has a functional currency of the Mexican peso. And any transaction, no matter what the transactional currency is, will always be translated back to the Mexican peso, with also having that transactional data stored as well. So very, very handy and necessary really for a lot of, again, our multinational companies. On top of this, I also want to show you this particular transaction, this journal entry. So this is actually the journal entry that transpired once that goods and service confirmation was complete. And for anyone who is in finance here will know, this is a pretty generic transaction. There is a credit to unbilled payables, and there's a debit to a P&L account that was used, or an expense account that shows the nature of the expense. Now, the interesting part about this particular transaction is that you'll notice up here that there is a secondary transaction that transpires on the same set of books, or there's two transactions that happen in the same set of books. Isolating that transaction, we can actually see that this particular P&L event gets reclassed to assets under construction or to the balance sheet. This particular transaction, while technically both of them happen automatically through this document, but this particular transaction happens because this document is attached to an asset under construction. The system knows this and will automatically reclass it to the balance sheet. So again, very popular for our mining companies, especially when building assets or creating or developing their mining operations. Even exploration, it can become very handy. And certainly something that happens or what we implement in phase one of our projects. Now, the one thing that's interesting to note within ByDesign is that the mechanism that drives this type of auto reclass to the balance sheet is actually done through our projects module. And we know this actually by drilling in on the P&L account here. We can notice that, or we can see that this particular transaction was linked to a project which we'll find as mine development exploration of new property. So we can actually drill into that mining operation or project, if you will, and see again, we have very a high level overview of the transaction itself. But by going to view all, again, showing you more detail to the transaction, or in this case, project, we're met with a very visual Gantt chart that depicts this particular mining project. And so in here, it looks like we have multiple different tasks, and these tasks represent different properties that are being created or developed. And inside these tasks, there are expenses that are being drilled through to. And this is what's driving that mechanism to not only capture the nature of the expense, but then reclassing it to the balance sheet. Before I get into the overview of the project, I do want to touch on the project project management work center itself. It is a very comprehensive project management tool that SAP has put a lot of resources to refining. Some customers will use this independent within their organizations as their project management software. Some opt to use EPCMs for some of our mining organizations and integrate data back to ByDesign. But again, it certainly is worth looking into leveraging project management within ByDesign as well, as it is a comprehensive tool. Such things as basic data can be captured at a task level. You can assign internal and external services, or in this case, employee services, employee resources to your particular project. The system will also look at the HR modules within ByDesign to understand the resource management of the employees, ensuring that they're not overloaded with work. Materials, so you can apply materials and therefore create material master planning through projects. You can create constraints in your scheduling, ensure that a particular task doesn't start before it should. Simple checklists can be driven here. Dependencies, so one task cannot be started before the next, and so on. So again, a lot of really powerful tools within the project management project or work center to help you through not only your mining projects, but even internal endeavors as well. So going back to the project itself, let me just scroll through into view all. We can see that there is a number of different data points that you can look into. But essentially, all the information here is exactly what you'd see when creating and maintaining your project. Now, the one thing I do want to sort of bring to fruition here is that as an end user of an ERP system, and again, as an end user in the accounting space, when interacting with an ERP, it is very important that a user is able to navigate through the system in a fluid basis. So when researching a particular transaction, this type of transaction very often has multiple different transactions, whether it precedes it or succeeds it. And so the availability to navigate through all these different transactions is crucial. Having ERP that is a single source of truth is one thing, but being able to transact and investigate these types of data points is even more meaningful. And so what I want to suggest and how I can bring this home is that we got to this actual project through a journal entry. And we understood that this journal entry was connected through a assets under construction or a project. We understood this through another journal entry that showed us a P&L impact on a supplier invoice. We got to that supplier invoice by looking at a purchase order and understanding the breadcrumb trail or the document flow of that particular purchase order. We got to the purchase order by understanding or investigating the supplier overview of a particular business partner. We got to that business partner by looking into a report that we slice and dice in a way that we like to see it. We got to that report by looking at a KPI that we investigated from our dashboard. So my point here is that we went within 20 minutes, we've come from our dashboard all the way to the granularity of a project task. So something that's very easy, as you can see, to do. Again, as long as the user has access to these types of work centers and these data sources, again, very easy for you to complete. So that's the sort of an example of a transaction. And again, I can't show the system all in 45 minutes, 50 minutes, but what I can show you, and I hope I at least illustrate to you, is how easy it is for you to navigate. One area that I also want to look into is the organizational management work center. So the Organizational Management Work Center is also something very unique to ByDesign. And so this houses actually the organization information within the system. And so as you can see, there's a consolidated or holding company. And within that consolidated holding company, we have two legal entities that have financial data and hold their own general ledgers. And as I suggested before, ByDesign is a multi-company system. And so therefore, the financial information or activity, it can be collected within one system, but separate to each each company. Now, in looking into the organizational structure, one thing I like to show our clients is how granular you can get with your organizational structure. And just to stop here, I do also want to inform that whenever doing an implementation, we always try to enable the client to reflect their organizational structure as it naturally is shown. This allows for a fluid sense of control within ByDesign so that you have approvals in place. And because majority of the natural organizational structure of your company is based on a hierarchy of approvals, that's typically the case of what we can see in ByDesign. So mimicking or mirroring your organizational structure as close as your actual organizational structure is key in the implementation phase, and something that we help our clients with quite often. Now, drilling into one of the organizational structures, you can see that you can actually drill into a very granular hierarchy of organizational units. Some of our clients will go to this level of granularity, and some of our clients will be a little bit more high level. But my point here is that there's really an endless amount of sister to parent relationship between your organizational structures. Briefly looking at the different attributes that these organizational structures inherit, we can see that some companies are, or some org units are companies, and this defines the company as having its own set of, or its own ledger, or own financial information that it should report on. We have business residence, which is our actual sites or physical locations that the company owns. We can define segment reporting for IFRS compliance. We have profit centers that will show whether there's revenue being driven through this organizational structure. And we have cost centers that will drive costs. Reporting lines will just show that this is a particular org unit that has approvals, and so on. So this gives you an example of how the organizational structure is managed within ByDesign, and it's truly the backbone to a lot of the functionality that happens within the system. So that's ByDesign, again, at a very high level and very specific to our mining implementations. Changing gears to our own or internal developed application called Production Statistics. This was a proprietary piece of software that we developed that allows our clients, or specifically our mining clients, to capture production statistics within their operations. And so the one thing I will at least preference at this point is that this is the sort of the conduit of collecting production statistics. But the more powerful part and really the more interesting part of why we brought in this project was connecting it or integrating it back into ByDesign. And I'll actually show that to you very shortly. But before I do, I'll give you a high level understanding of how the application works. So in here we have maintain unit of measure. And so of course, a lot of our clients will use a very broad use of units of measures. Just give me 1 second, I'm just going to sign in. My apologies, just logged out or timed out. So like I said, our customers usually use a broad spectrum of units of measures. But of course, we can adopt this from a list of generic ones. But in the case that there's a specific unit of measure that you would like to track, we can certainly bring that in here as well. So you can create custom unit measures such as troy ounces, for example. So very handy to maintain your own units of measures. A prerequisite with the application is to maintain also your statistical key figures. So this is where you're going to define that key figure. So in this case, we have drilling meters or gold produced, mucking, and attaching it to a unit of measure. So in drilling meters, we have meters obviously as a unit of measure that would attach itself to this SKF. Now, bringing this back to some of the integrations that we've done with ByDesign, you'll notice that a lot these locations are actually driven through the organizational structure that is within our ByDesign tenant. So these are actual locations that we brought in through a custom API, and something that you can simply add by clicking on this button, which will integrate back to or send an API call to ByDesign and bring it back into this application. So very seamless and quality data that comes into the application. Moving on to defaults, this is actually not only a control mechanism, but also a user experience enhancement that we brought to the application. So as we can see here, I have my particular user, and these are all the defaults that this user would be inherent to. So again, if this particular user shouldn't see BR Vancouver, then we can remove it, thereby not allowing the user to even enter data on behalf of this particular location. Same can be true for shifts. If this user never works the night shift, then don't allow them to select it within their data entry. SKS as well, and you can also control some of the date formatting or formatting such as dates, and also which defaults their dates when they're driving data. So again, allows for a more seamless experience for the user, but also creates controls. Now getting to the nuts and bolts, you'll see here this is the data entry. So majority of the users will at least have option or access to this. Most of the functions here are reserved for super users. But in the case of data entry, you'll notice that most people will have this because this is where the data is provided. And again, you'll only see the locations that were provided in the user's default. And adding in an SKF is as simple as just clicking the add button, entering in the date for which the SKF was collected, bringing in the SKF that was actually brought through our defaults. Again, our shift is only day shift, and say we had drilled 500 meters on May 18th. That's how easy it is to create data entry within production statistics. In some of our clients, we especially want those that are underground mines where connectivity is low or non-existent. We do have solutions for situations where there is a admin staff that will be collecting SKFs that are recorded in the underground mine, and they can enter that information on behalf of the person who collected that SKF. So that's also possible. Moving on into, so bringing it full circle, again, this application is only here to collect the information, but the real value in the application that we develop is really in the analytics or reporting aspect of things. And so moving into the reporting dashboard that we developed for this particular application, you'll notice that we have a ton of different KPIs that we've developed and visuals that are inherent within SAP. So for example, here, if we have a cost distribution report, we can simply click on it, drill down further into that particular cost driver, and understand what drives all that information. So these are all custom dashboards that we developed specifically for our mining IP solution. You can drill back up or back down, whichever direction you wish, or go back to your default. A really handy tool within cost distribution and a value add within ByDesign or with SAP is an area called Smart Insight. Smart Insights is an AI engine that drives reporting based on the data that's in the back end. So for example, we are focusing in on labor for cost distribution. And inside here, we can see that this total for Q4 2018 was $8.4 million, an increase of 22% from 1.527 compared to Q3, which is 6.9 million. So these are all analytics that are driven in the back end purely through the AI engine that's provided by SAP. You can drill further into it by looking into the actual analytics that drives this reporting, and you can interact with those graphs through monthly, quarterly, and daily data, whichever you see fit. So that's Smart Insights. Another area that we've developed for the mining dashboard is the predictive analysis. So you'll see here within the operating costs, there's a number of data points that are driven from a series of time. But in this case, again, this is a test tenant, so it's December 18th and December 2018, and the future is January 2019. In this case, the system will complete a predictive analysis and try to forecast which data point would be relevant for January 2019. And you can spread this type of predictive analytics further than just one month. I would note, though, however, that the predictive analysis is only as good as the data that you provide it. So the larger the pool of data, the more accurate, of course, the predictive analysis will be. Lastly, I also want to just touch on the fact that you can also collaborate with your team. And you can do this through a add comment feature. So you can say, this data looks good, and send it to any of your team members by just simply and including the team member that you wish to send this information to. In this case, that Michael Howell would actually receive a notification notifying him of my comment, and for which he can click on the link to better understand what my thoughts were. You can also do this comment functionality overall and comment on the dashboard and store different types of comments, and of course the archives are stored here as well. So that's a high level area of the mining IP dashboard. Focusing in more on the production statistics and really bringing full circle the information that I showed you in ByDesign and marrying it with the information that we created in the production statistics app, you can see all this information being brought together. So all the costs that are being driven through ByDesign can be compared to the locations that are being driven through production statistics. So for example, if you created a location, say again, business resident Vancouver, and this business resident, of course, will have costs that are driven towards it as a cost center, you can do comparative analysis with the SKS you provided through the application and the costs that are provided in ByDesign through your ERP. Putting them together into one report will obviously make that very relevant and very meaningful for your analytics. In the case of production statistics, we can obviously bring in budgets and actuals. So in this case, we have silver ounces produced and gold ounces produced combined, but you can hone in on these different types of materials by simply clicking the radio buttons on the left panel. Drilling further into production performance. This is an area where we drove a lot of financial reporting in one dashboard. So although this does say open pit mining and provides information specifically on open pit mining, we can also leverage the same dashboards to produce custom financial statements, notes to your financial statements, and so on. So again, all real-time APIs back into your ByDesign portal or tenant, and making a seamless area for you to report financials or any other pieces of data that you wish to show. So that's production statistics reporting dashboards that again we've developed in connection to our production statistics application that we also developed as well for our mining clients. So I think that's the majority of what I wanted to touch on, especially as an overview for mining purposes. So I invite the team or the group to provide any questions that I can provide answers to. And Rihanna, I'll send it back to you for any of those questions.
Thanks, Jacob. So I'll give everyone a moment to put together any questions you may have for Jacob or Pat. And in the meantime, I'll let you all know that following today's demonstration, tomorrow all attendees will receive a copy of today's presentation deck along with a copy of the recording. So if you find you want to revisit any of the information covered today, you can do so at your own leisure and connect with us at a later date if you happen to have any questions. But since we do have some time available right now, let's see what questions we've already have coming through. So Jacob, I think this first one is for you. Can the solution track fixed assets?
Yep. So ByDesign has a subledger that tracks all of our fixed assets. And so something that is sometimes unique with some of our mining organizations that they implement. So anything from acquisition costs, any additions to the fixed asset, impairments, all that can be tracked through the fixed asset subledger. A lot of our clients also bring in mineral properties, so any of the exploration costs that they incurred will be brought in as a mineral property, and of course appreciated based on units of production. So all this is tracked specifically through, and actually maybe I'll quickly show through this particular work center. And of course, any of the periodic tasks such as depreciations are all run automatically and seamlessly. So making your quarterly or month-end procedures a breeze when it relates to fixed assets.
Thanks, Jacob. Here's the next one. I think either Pat or Jacob can take this one, maybe provide both your perspectives. What's the difference between SAP Business by Design and SAP S/4HANA Cloud Edition from SAP? What kind of company is suitable for BYD versus S/4HANA Cloud? And I think by cloud, they mean public cloud. Who wants to take
Great
that
question.
You want to take it?
Pat,
Do you want me to answer? Sure. So Business by Design, we've really positioned this with our junior mining companies that might have a head office and maybe a couple of mine sites globally. The SAP S/4HANA Cloud solution, we also sell and implement, and that's really designed for larger mining companies that have more complex requirements and will require some configuration to change some of the core business processes. So Business by Design, we've taken our template, really kind of simplified that into core business processes, which are designed for junior mining companies that don't require as much configuration or customization. It is a SaaS model, so it is a public cloud model, Business by Design, software as a service, and you pay for users that are going to be using the system.
And sorry, Pat, if I could add on to that as well. As someone who is dealing with implementations and has direct, interactions with our customers, using ByDesign, and especially again with our mining IP solution, it shortens implementation drastically using ByDesign. Again, as using the off-the-shelf configurations from ByDesign, but also adding in the experience that we have through implementing several mines allows us to streamline that process, making it very easier for your team to, of course, implement a new ERP, making change management quite easy.
Right. We've got close to a dozen mines now that are running on Business by Design, so or in process of implementing.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing your perspective. Next question is, are there any mobile-friendly features within SAP Business by Design?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yep, so there is a mobile app that is offered in, of course, Android and iPhone stores. This application does serve for, although limited functionality, but is, what exactly you probably want to see a mobile application for. So, for example, expense reimbursements, labor and time management, so entering in time for a project. Approvals can also be done through mobile apps. So things that are very easy to see, not very data driven, or don't require a lot of data to process. those are things that can be driven through the application. Very seamless, and of course the user experience is great for those types of tasks. You can actually technically run ByDesign on a mobile phone, but again, because there's so much information being shown on screen, so again, you can bring this up on your phone if you wish, but the user experience is not as good. The application just does hone in on those core competencies, as I mentioned before, and certainly something that is used quite a bit, not only in mining, but in all of our implementations that we bring to life.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob. Next one. Does SAP Business ByDesign have an EAM solution or mobile solution called Asset Manager? This is in reference to both ByDesign and S/4HANA. Is Asset Manager available in either solution?
Yes. So for maintenance module, there is an add-on that we work with in Business ByDesign. Has the absolute same look and feel as Business ByDesign. It's built in the solution development kit for Business ByDesign. So we do have a full solution for preventative and predictive maintenance, preventative and corrective maintenance, sorry. And there also is a maintenance module within SAP S4.
Thanks, Pat. And then if no other questions pop up, I think this is the last one we have. So the questioner is asking if there are some restrictions within ByDesign. For example, develop Z table for additional access control, interfaces with banks, etc. Do those restrictions exist?
Yep, of course. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, there are not only, so again, you can adopt the segregation of duties compliance recommendations within ByDesign. And again, that's drafted through Sarbanes-Oxley requirements, but also through ByDesign's 40 years of experience within ERP. So they have a lot of experience to understand their work centers and the transactions that transpire within their work centers and how that may conflict at a segregation of duty standpoint. So that's the first thing I would say. But of course, you know, an organization isn't, you know, every organization is different, and certainly controls can be very different between one to another. So the reason why I say that is because the ability to block information from a user or the ability to grant or not grant access to information is very easy to do and very customizable. We can even do read-write privileges for most, if not all, data objects. And we can drive this through different parameters. So setting up firewalls between companies, or even a user by user basis. So long story short, absolutely, there's ways to customize user interface and data as well.
Thank you, Jacob. Well, I think that's all the time we have for the remainder of this session. If any of the attendees have any further questions for our presenters, feel free to use the contact information available with this broadcast to send those questions over, and we can definitely connect you with either speaker. In the meantime, I want to thank you all for attending this broadcast and thank our presenters for a lovely presentation. We at Illumity also welcome any feedback you may have for today's webcast. I'd like to thank you all for attending. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and let us know how we did. Thank you, guys.